Mexico may be the biggest winner from America's break with China. For decades, if an American company wanted to manufacture something cheaply, the answer was usually simple: China. China had the workers, the factories, the ports, the suppliers, and an enormous manufacturing ecosystem capable of producing almost anything American consumers wanted to buy. But that relationship is changing. Tariffs, rising costs, supply chain disruptions, and growing geopolitical tensions have pushed American companies to look for alternatives. Vietnam, India, Malaysia, Indonesia. But one country has the advantage that none of them can match. Mexico doesn't need to put its products on a container ship and send them thousands of miles. It shares a 2,000-mile border with the largest consumer economy in the world. Factories in northern Mexico can produce and move them into the United States by truck or rail. Mexico already has a massive manufacturing industry. And because of the USMCA trade agreement, much of what Mexico produces can enter the United States under preferential trade rules when it meets the agreement's requirements. Which raises an interesting question. As America tries to reduce its independence from China, could the biggest winner actually be the country right next door? Could Mexico become the next factory floor for the American economy? Why Mexico? Well, let's start with geography. If you manufacture something in China and want to sell it in the United States, you have to move it thousands of miles. That means container ships, ports, customs, warehouses, railroads, and eventually trucks before that product ever reaches an American store. Mexico, it has a completely different advantage. Hell, it's already here. Mexico shares nearly 2,000 miles of border with the United States. Major manufacturing centers in northern Mexico sit just hours from American cities. A factory in Monterrey can put a product on a truck and move it north toward the American market without ever putting it on a ship. But geography alone wouldn't be enough. Mexico has spent decades developing one of the largest manufacturing industries in the Western Hemisphere. Cars, auto parts, electronics, appliances, medical devices, aerospace components. These aren't industries Mexico is trying to build from scratch. They're already there. And the economic relationship between Mexico and the United States, it's already deeply integrated. A car assembled in Mexico might contain parts manufactured in the United States, cross the border multiple times during production, and eventually be sold to an American consumer. Then there's the USMCA. The trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada gives qualifying goods produced within North America preferential treatment across these markets. Put all of that together and Mexico offers something very few countries can match. Competitive manufacturing costs, an established industrial workforce, existing factories and supply chains, preferential access to the American market, and most importantly, geography. For decades, China's great advantage was that it could manufacture almost anything cheaper than anyone else anywhere. Well, Mexico doesn't necessarily have to beat China at everything. It just has to be close enough, competitive enough, and reliable that manufacturing thousands of miles across the Pacific starts making less sense. And companies have noticed. As businesses began looking for ways to reduce their exposure to China, Mexico suddenly became much more attractive. There's even a name for what's happening. It's called nearshoring. Instead of manufacturing something on the other side of the world, companies move production closer to the customers who are actually going to buy the thing anyway. For the United States, there aren't many places closer than Mexico. Industrial centers like Monterrey have become increasingly important to companies looking for manufacturing capacity close to the American market and not in China. Factories need more than cheap labor. They need highways, rail connections, warehouses, electricity. Hell, they need a supplier ecosystem. Mexico already has much of that infrastructure in place. And every new factory can make the next factory easier to build. Suppliers follow manufacturers. Logistics companies expand, warehouses are built, workers gain experience, entire industrial clusters begin developing around successful industry. It's the same kind of network effect that helped make China so difficult to replace in the first place. But there's an interesting twist. American companies aren't the only ones looking at Mexico. Chinese companies are too. For a Chinese manufacturer facing tariffs, political tension, and expensive journeys across the Pacific, putting production in Mexico can offer something extremely valuable: access to the North American economy, which creates a strange possibility. America's attempt to reduce its dependence on China manufacturing could help turn Mexico into a manufacturing powerhouse. But some of the companies helping build that powerhouse may themselves be Chinese. So is Mexico actually replacing China, or is China simply moving closer to America? Well, the answer is a little bit of both. Chinese companies increasingly have the same reason to invest in Mexico that American companies do: geography. Instead of manufacturing everything in China and shipping finished products across the Pacific, a Chinese company can build or invest in production much closer to its American customers. But simply building something in Mexico doesn't automatically turn a Chinese product into a Mexican product. USMCA has rules of origin that determine whether a product actually qualifies for preferential treatment. Those rules are particularly important in industries like automobiles, where a significant portion of the vehicle's value must come from North America. And that distinction is becoming increasingly important because Washington doesn't want Mexico to become nothing more than a backdoor around tariffs for China. If Chinese companies can simply ship components to Mexico, perform minimal assembly, put a different label on it, and ship that product to America, well, that doesn't actually work for America. It has just changed the set. But there's another possibility. Chinese companies could build real factories in Mexico, hire Mexican workers, buy more components from North American suppliers, pay Mexican taxes, and become increasingly integrated into the North American manufacturing system. At that point, the question becomes much more complicated. Is that still Chinese manufacturing? Or is it now Mexican manufacturing owned by a Chinese company? Global supply chains don't fit neatly inside national borders anymore. And Mexico may find itself directly in the middle of that transformation. Because the more America tries to pull supply chains away from China, the more valuable Mexico's position becomes. Not just to American companies, but to almost anyone who wants to enter the American market. So Mexico has geography. It has the factories, the workers, and access to the largest economy in the world. But none of that guarantees success. Because turning Mexico into an even larger manufacturing powerhouse requires something much harder. Mexico has to build the infrastructure to support it. Factories need enormous amounts of electricity. They need reliable water supplies. They need highways, border crossings, warehouses, and ports capable of handling increasing amounts of freight. And in some of Mexico's fastest growing industrial regions, those systems are already under pressure. Then there's security. Manufacturers move billions of dollars worth of products. They need to know their factories, workers, and cargo are safe. Mexico also has to provide something every advanced manufacturing economy eventually needs: skilled workers. Modern factories increasingly require engineers, technicians, programmers, machinists, and highly trained manufacturing workers. Those workers can't be created overnight, and Mexico isn't the only country competing for this investment. Vietnam wants it. India, countries across Southeast Asia want it. And the United States, well, hell, it wants it itself. So Mexico's opportunity is enormous, but taking advantage of it will require more than simply being next-door neighbors to the United States. Mexico has to turn that advantage into an industrial advantage. And if it can do that, the consequences could reshape the North American economy. For decades, globalization was largely about moving manufacturing farther away in search of lower costs. The next area may be about bringing supply chains closer to the people who actually buy those damn products. And few countries are better positioned to benefit from that change than Mexico. America may be trying to reduce its dependence on China, but the biggest winner from that shift might not be America. It might be Mexico. Hey, if you like what you heard, this is Frank with America's Geopolitics. Don't forget to like and subscribe.